Amazon just broadcast the Masters for the first time in history. They built that broadcast around a documentary about Rory McIlroy, and Netflix just confirmed he is the anchor of their biggest golf project of 2026. Two of the three largest streaming platforms on Earth are fighting over the same golfer at the same time. This is not about one TV deal. Amazon Prime Video is a $494 billion platform. Netflix is valued at the same level. Both of them are now competing for McIlroy content in the same calendar year, which means the combined streaming investment around one golfer in 2026 alone exceeds anything the sport has ever produced around a single player. The last time this happened in any sport, the athlete became something the sport had never seen before. Honestly, I think Rory McIlroy has quietly become the most commercially powerful figure in professional golf right now. Not because he is the best player, but because his story has become genuinely unmissable television, and every streaming platform knows it. Do you think McIlroy's streaming media presence will eventually make him more commercially powerful than Scheffler, even though Scheffler is the better golfer? Drop it in the comments right now.
And stay with me, because what Amazon Prime's first Masters broadcast specifically chose to do with McIlroy's documentary slot tells you exactly how the streaming platforms are positioning golf content going forward, and I am not getting to it until later in this video. To understand what is happening around Rory McIlroy and the streaming platforms, you need to understand what his 2025 season produced beyond the scorecards.
He won the Masters in April 2025, 11th year trying. The most documented single sporting pursuit in golf history. Every near miss recorded, every Augusta Sunday collapse preserved on tape, every press conference answer about what it would mean replayed across a decade of coverage. When he made that putt on the 18th green at Augusta National, the reaction from the broadcast team, from the gallery, from players watching on TV in their hotel rooms was as close as professional golf gets to a genuine cultural moment. Then in July 2025, Scheffler won the Open Championship at Royal Portrush, and Rory watched. Then in 2026, Rory went back to Augusta to defend, and the streaming platforms were already positioned. Amazon Prime Video had secured broadcast rights to the Masters for the very first time, 2 hours of early week tournament coverage, giving Augusta National its first full streaming partner in the event's history. That deal was in place before McIlroy won in 2025. The Masters' decision to bring in Amazon was not about McIlroy.
But the documentary Amazon chose to anchor their first Masters streaming season was absolutely about him.
Here is the number that frames the scale of what just happened. Netflix has $45.2 billion in annual revenue. Amazon Prime Video is embedded in a company worth over $3 trillion. When both of those platforms invest simultaneously in golf content, anchored around the same player, the combined media investment represents something the PGA Tour's own broadcast deals have never produced. A single athlete becoming the anchor of two competing premium streaming strategies at the same time. The last time professional golf had that level of converging media investment around one player, the player was Tiger Woods in 2000, and the deal structures rewrote what sports media rights were worth.
None of that explains why Amazon specifically chose the McIlroy documentary to anchor their inaugural Masters broadcast, rather than producing original tournament content. That decision is the one nobody talked about correctly, and it's coming. Here is what McIlroy said when the Amazon documentary was announced. "It has been an incredible journey to Augusta National. To have this story told through Amazon is something I'm incredibly grateful for."
Short, controlled, grateful. The exact register you would expect from a player who has spent 15 years managing media relationships with discipline. But what that statement does not capture is the strategic decision Amazon made when they paired the documentary with their first Masters broadcast. Think about that pairing from Amazon's perspective. You have just secured the first ever streaming rights to the Masters tournament, one of the 4 most prestigious sporting events in the world. Your inaugural broadcast needs to establish that you belong in the same room as CBS, ESPN, and the Golf Channel. You have 2 hours of early week coverage. You need to tell viewers why they should care about your version of Masters Week.
So you build a documentary about the player who finally ended his 11-year wait for Augusta, a player who cried on the 18th green in front of the world, a player who had been asked about the Masters every year for a decade and answered every time with a version of "this is the one that's missing." And you release that documentary in the same window as your first Masters broadcast. That is not a coincidence.
That is a calculated decision to use the most emotionally resonant golf story of the last decade as the credibility anchor for a new broadcast relationship.
Jack Nicklaus agreed to be the headline guest for Amazon's first Masters broadcast.
Nicklaus is the Masters' most decorated champion. His agreement to appear on Amazon, not CBS, not ESPN, Amazon, signals that Augusta National has given the streaming platform genuine institutional support. That credibility transfer would not happen without the McIlroy documentary providing a narrative foundation for the entire broadcast week. Amazon did not buy Masters broadcast rights and then find a documentary. They built a Masters content strategy, and McIlroy's story was the spine of it. Now here's the Netflix side of this.
Because the Netflix full swing situation is what makes the simultaneous investment from both platforms genuinely remarkable.
Full Swing Season 4 is confirmed. Filming wrapped at the Ryder Cup in October 2025. 6 episodes. Netflix's production team has already stated that Rory McIlroy's 2025 season, the Masters win, the Open loss, the Ryder Cup, is among the anchor storylines. Season 3, released in February 2025, specifically featured Scheffler's arrest situation, Bryson's redemption arc, and McIlroy's emotional breakdown at Augusta 2024 when he wept on the 18th green after finishing second. That moment generated more social media engagement than any single non-tournament golf event in recorded streaming history.
Here is the question the streaming platforms are answering with their investment. Which golfer produces the most compelling television? Not the best golf, but the most human, most emotional, most unmissable stories. The answer, based on where the money is going in 2026, is not Scheffler, it is McIlroy. Should the PGA Tour be doing more to leverage McIlroy's streaming media power into a broader commercial strategy for the tour, or is this entirely McIlroy's personal win?
And just when this looks like a straightforward story about a popular player attracting media investment, the structural implications for every other golfer on tour become clear. And what it means for them is the part of this conversation nobody is having. We'll get there. Here is what the PGA Tour promised the broader player membership when it began building relationships with streaming platforms.
The promise, streaming revenue would expand the commercial reach of professional golf and benefit the full player ecosystem. More eyeballs, more engagement, more money flowing into the tour's prize fund structure. Netflix Full Swing Season 1 was specifically cited by tour leadership as evidence that behind-the-scenes content could grow the game's audience in ways traditional broadcasts never had.
What the broader player membership gave up, the old model of earned media exposure, where any player who performed well in a major week could become the broadcast's lead story for a day. In the streaming model, the editorial choices are made before cameras arrive. The players with pre-existing narrative infrastructure, the ones whose career arcs have been documented across multiple seasons, get screen time. The players who are 2 years into their careers and have not yet been featured get a fraction of that exposure.
Put yourself in the position of a 25-year-old PGA Tour player who turned professional in 2024. You have one tour win, you have a top 10 finish at a major. You are one of the 20 most talented golfers in the world by any objective measurement. And in 2026, Netflix Full Swing Season 4 features Rory McIlroy, Scottie Scheffler, and returning characters from previous seasons because their narrative arcs are already established and the audience already cares about them. How do you get your story told? How do you build the kind of emotional connection with a streaming audience that turns casual viewers into fans who follow you to events?
The answer, under the current streaming model, is that you wait for Netflix or Amazon to decide your story is worth telling. And that decision is based entirely on narrative value, not on your strokes gained numbers or your world ranking. What players outside the top tier of established names are now asking, is the streaming revolution actually growing golf's audience, or is it concentrating existing audience attention around a smaller group of already famous players?
The most relevant historical comparison is what happened to the PGA Tour's broadcast model in the Tiger Woods era. Tiger's television ratings were so dominant that events where he did not play drew audiences 40 to 60% smaller than events where he did. The tour benefited enormously from Tiger's drawing power and, simultaneously, developed a structural dependency on one player's presence that created a genuine crisis when he was injured. The streaming platforms are building the same dependency around McIlroy and Scheffler. Anilon's master strategy runs through McIlroy's documentary. Netflix Full Swing's audience engagement data from Season 3 runs through the McIlroy break. Now here is the part nobody has connected. Rory McIlroy, The Masters Wait, was produced by everyone else, the production company responsible for the Oscar-winning 2011 documentary Undefeated, which followed the Manassas Tigers high school football team. That documentary won Best Documentary Feature at the Academy Awards. The company that made it is now making golf content for Amazon Prime. This is not a sports production company that got lucky with a platform deal. This is an Oscar-caliber documentary team applying the narrative structure of award-winning filmmaking to professional golf for the first time at a major streaming platform.
The implication: Amazon is not treating McIlroy's documentary like sports content. They are treating it like prestige documentary content that happens to be about a golfer. That is a categorically different commercial proposition than anything the PGA Tour has ever been involved in. If Rory McIlroy, the Masters weight, wins or is nominated for a documentary Emmy, which is not impossible given the production company's pedigree, professional golf will have its first genuine award season presence in the prestige documentary category.
Nobody in golf media has framed this that way. They covered the deal. They did not cover what the deal's production lineage means for where golf sits in the streaming content hierarchy. PGA Tour CEO Brian Rolap addressed the streaming partnership landscape in general terms when discussing the tour's commercial direction this year. His framing: streaming is expanding the game's reach. More platforms, more content, more ways for fans to engage with golf. He described the tour's relationship with streaming platforms as part of a broader strategy to reach younger audiences who do not watch traditional broadcast television. The Amazon Masters.
But watch who the ecosystem is actually winning for. Amazon's Masters deal is anchored by a McIlroy documentary. Netflix's returning season is centered on players who have been featured in previous seasons. The tour's streaming strategy, as Rolap describes it, sounds like a rising tide. What it looks like in practice is a spotlight that keeps finding the same 10 players. Rolap's expanding reach argument would be more compelling if the streaming content that drives that reach actually expanded the roster of recognizable names. Full Swing Season 1 did introduce players like Cameron Smith and Adam Scott to audiences who had never watched golf before. That was genuine audience development.
But by season 4, the show is returning to established characters, and the Amazon documentary is a deep dive into one player's 11-year story. That is not expansion. That is consolidation around the most bankable narratives the sport has produced in the last decade. Is the streaming revolution actually growing golf's audience broadly? Or is it making the sport's biggest stars bigger while leaving most players exactly where they were? Comment: genuinely growing the sport or just making big stars bigger? Rolap's streaming optimism is not wrong about the commercial opportunity. It is incomplete about who inside the sport captures it. The tour gets the platform relationships and the revenue. The players who are already famous get the screen time. The players who need screen time to become famous get neither.
The Open Championship at Royal Birkdale is days away. McIlroy will be there as the defending champion. Amazon is broadcasting nothing from Birkdale. Their Masters relationship is specific to Augusta. But Netflix Full Swing Season 4 cameras were at the Ryder Cup in October 2025, and Birkdale footage of the defending Open champion chasing a second claret jug is exactly the narrative the production team needs. Here is the counterintuitive number. Netflix Full Swing Season 3, which focused heavily on McIlroy's emotional Augusta journey and Scheffler's arrest, generated the highest social engagement numbers of any. That clip is under 2 minutes long. It was watched more than most complete tour broadcasts. The emotional resonance of McIlroy's story, the waiting, the almost winning, the finally winning, is now a documented content property with proven audience numbers. And Birkdale is the next chapter of it. Defending champion, winless since January, chasing a jug he talked about giving back earlier this week. Here is the question for the streaming platforms now. Do you invest more in the McIlroy story at Birkdale, or do you shift focus to Scheffler's winless drought in Grand Slam?
Here is the pattern that the McIlroy streaming situation exposes about how professional golf is now being consumed and who controls the narrative. For 50 years, golf's broadcast model was built around the tournament. The course was the product. The tournament infrastructure, the leaderboard, the cut, the Sunday chase, was what you tuned in for. Players were part of the product, but the event was primary. Netflix changed that. Full Swing.
You watched both of those moments, probably more than once, and you know that neither of them was primarily about golf. They were about the people inside the golf shoes and what it costs to want something this badly for this long. That is what streaming platforms are buying, not golf coverage, human stories that happen to feature golf. The implication for the sport is specific. The players who generate compelling personal narratives now have commercial value that is entirely separate from their world ranking or their earnings on tour. McIlroy did not have the most successful 2025 season by the numbers. Scheffler did. But McIlroy had the most emotionally compelling arc. The 11-year wait, the break.
The suits did not build this. The story built it. And for once, the suits are just trying to keep up. That is unusual in professional golf.
The tour has spent 3 years restructuring its schedule, its prize funds, and its broadcast relationships. The streaming platforms did not care about any of that. They found the most human story in the sport and invested in it. The consequence for the players who do not have that kind of story? No streaming deal, no documentary, no prestige production team, no Amazon platform debut. Good world ranking, good career, no screen time beyond tournament broadcasts.
Professional golf now has 2 parallel commercial economies running simultaneously. The prize money economy, where Scheffler wins, the narrative economy, where McIlroy wins. Both are real, both have value, and for the first time, a player can be more commercially powerful in the second economy than in the first. Should the PGA Tour be doing more to develop streaming-worthy stories from players outside the top tier, or should players be responsible for building?
Here is where this lands. Amazon Prime is broadcasting the Masters with a McIlroy documentary as its anchor content. Netflix is returning to full swing, with McIlroy as a lead figure. An Oscar-winning production company is applying prestige documentary filmmaking to his career story. 2 of the world's 3 largest streaming platforms are simultaneously invested in the same golfer's narrative. That did not happen because of a $500 million deal or a secret contract. It happened because Rory McIlroy spent 11 years losing the Masters in the most public, most documented, most emotionally resonant way possible, and then won it. And streaming platforms are in the business of human stories, not golf scorecards.
Scheffler is the better golfer right now. He may be the better golfer for years, but McIlroy is the better television character. Not by design, but by lived experience. The streaming world is paying for lived experience, and his has been extraordinary. Royal Birkdale starts this week. The defending champion, with 2 streaming platforms invested in his story, will tee it up in the first round. If he wins, if he defends the jug and adds another chapter to the narrative that Amazon and Netflix are already selling, the commercial conversation around his media value will reach a level the sport has not seen since Tiger was at his peak. Subscribe for full Birkdale coverage the moment it breaks, because McIlroy defending at Birkdale is one of the 2 or 3 most commercially significant golf stories of this decade. And when Sunday arrives, you are going to want the breakdown immediately.